With how many game-ending threats there are in modern Magic, many games are determined by whether or not someone has a removal spell. And while it's important to know what needs removed, it's often just as important to know when to use your removal. That's what we're going to tackle today. I felt like hitting this topic because of something that happened in the newest episode of our Commander gameplay series. To set the scene, Tommy keeps a 1-land hand because he's able to turn 1 Soul Ring into a Talisman.
I apologize in advance. We're going to play an island, tap it for 1 for a Soul Ring, and then tap it for 2 for a Talisman of Dominance.
Well, hold on!
Risky, but that's a decent amount of mana. I'm sure we've all kept hands like that before. But he goes on to miss many land drops over the course of the game, especially early on. This makes Preston's move a few turns later quite brutal.
Oh, this is so mean.
Why is it mean? How are we getting mean this early?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna overload Vandal Blast.
Oh no.
Well,
why?
Well, that sucks.
Now, if Tommy was popping off and putting a lot of work in with those mana rocks, maybe that would make this worth doing, but he wasn't. If Preston was better able to protect himself after drawing heat, especially when he himself also had a bunch of early mana rocks, maybe it would be worth doing, but he wasn't. In fact, he spends the next several turns being punched, even though he's not really the threat. This is even worse when you consider the fact that we're a channel making content for people to enjoy. Yes, we want to play the game as normally as possible, but we also want the content to be the best it can be. Blowing Tommy out of the water so he does basically nothing the whole game doesn't make for good content. That won't apply to most people, but I thought it was worth noting. And then lastly, and most importantly, there was an artifact deck at the table. It probably would have made a lot more sense to wait for Steven to deploy more of his cards before casting the Vandal Blast. Spoiler alert, Steven goes on to win that game. So now that we've covered that situation, it's time to ask the question, when should you cast your removal? This question assumes that you have already come to terms with the fact that you need some amount of removal, despite what some people in the community might say. What if an opponent plays a brutal hate piece against your deck? You could hope someone else removes it, you could try to kill that player, but the best option is just remove the one piece of hate and carry on. Maybe a better example, what if an opponent has a card that will win them the game right now if no one takes care of it? Especially instant speed removal will ensure that that doesn't happen. For today's purposes, we're also not going to categorize board wipes as removal. Yes, that's what they're for, but they often act as a reset button. While there are plenty of board wipes that can feel one-sided, that won't always be the case in practice. Often you just need to get rid of the scariest thing on your opponent's board without losing everything of your own. Now, this was probably too much setup for a simple question with a simple answer. So when do you use your removal? And the answer is as late as possible. Remember, in a game of Commander, you have 3 opponents. Yes, one of them might be doing something scary, but if they're going to be spending their resources on another opponent, they're probably helping you. You're probably okay with them fighting it out as long as you can come away from it mostly unscathed. Now, quote, as late as possible will mean different things for different decks. If you think there's a creature you'll need to remove, it's obviously best to have instant speed removal just in case. Then you might be able to use your mana for something else if you don't need to remove it. But if your removal is sorcery speed, you'll need to use more brain power or politicking to determine if now is the time or not. The timing is most complicated in blue decks. Outside of Cyclonic Rift, bounce spells aren't very popular in Commander. That means most of the removal in blue comes down to counterspells. With counterspells, it's hard to know when the now is. You won't have the luxury of getting to wait and see how that card will be used at the table. With the spell still on the stack, you'll have to try getting information out of your opponents. However, that's also the power of counterspells in multiplayer formats. If you start prying information on how a threat will be used, whether or not you actually have the counterspell, your opponents will likely be willing to bend to your will if it means you don't counter their spell. The best counterspell is the one you never have to use. If you're playing blue and aren't fond of these mind games, blue might not be your color. However, you do have other options. Rapid Hybridization, Pongify, Ravenform, and Resculpt I think are all great and underrated removal spells in blue. Now you might be wondering, if you're waiting until the last minute to cast your removal, does that make them dead cards? Not really. Many cards are situational. While you want to make sure you don't have a ton in your deck, you want to have enough that you're likely to have them when needed. Plus, in the power creep era of Commander, card draw engines are extreme enough that you'll always have other cards to cast. Best yet, removal is very customizable. Yes, sometimes you'll just want the most efficient and most flexible options, but some decks will be able to lean into more synergistic options. For example, in my Kudo deck that I played on our show, Aura Shards is insane, getting to blow up an artifact or enchantment for every creature I cast in a creature deck. The deck also took advantage of creatures with Enter the Battlefield effects. These cards are not only great in creature decks that have creature payoffs, but also in blink decks that can reuse the effects. And it's not just creature decks that can be customized in this way. Artifact, enchantment, planeswalker decks, and more all have cards that can be used as removal while also fulfilling the main purpose of the deck. So I hope this video was helpful. Maybe you are now a little better equipped to know when to cast your removal as well as how to customize your removal package. If you want to see the video that inspired me to make this video, you can click on that here, or if you want to catch the newest episode of our podcast, you can check that out here as well. Remember to like and subscribe and let me know your thoughts in the comments. I'll see you guys next time.